I just watched over on Hank's channel the video about why everybody is getting everything so wrong about AI and water usage. And I have a lot of thoughts on this. I kind of want to break it up into kind of 4 or 5 points that I feel like I can actually speak on from my experience, not that I'm an expert in any of these things. So the first thing, and he mentioned a couple times, not everybody needs to be an expert or even have like a rudimentary, up to date understanding of how all of our water systems work, much less how AI works or any of these things. As someone who's pursued and been involved in higher education and specifically scientific research for many years, I want to give a really kind of personal example, but that's also universal, as in one of the only things that has affected so much of humanity at the same time in our kind of conscious past. And that's, of course, COVID. So I'll preface this by saying that I was in a privileged position during COVID, and it took a lot of real world experience for me to kind of understand the difference between what I was able to do during that time and what others were able to do. So that being said, I actually started my payback working at the National Institutes of Health in the Office of the Director in 2020. It's a very interesting time to work at the National Institutes of Health. The NIH was not even a thing that I think most people knew the name of, unless you're from the area, have family or parents in higher education and medicine. It's just not a thing that most people know about, or, I mean, frankly, need to know about. Anyway, it was a dream of mine to work there. I wasn't working there in the capacity that I had initially dreamed of, which was to be doing research, but instead was in what was supposed to be a writing role, but it kind of evolved as everything progressed in COVID. So I worked in the office of intramural training and education, higher OT, I love you, which, like any workplace, has its problems, has problems with its people, whatever. But what I can say confidently about that office is that every single person there cares deeply about their job, cares deeply about the future of people, cares deeply about the future of young scientists especially. So without getting into too many of the kind of political issues or other complicated aspects of that role, I'll say this. I worked very hard to get into the program I was in, the National Institutes of Health. I had years and years of scientific research, just pouring my heart into it to get to that place, because it is, or at least was, one of the most influential places of scientific research and the advancing of biomedical science there, but also just through the funding that they provide to the world. So it was a big deal for me. It's a big deal for most people to work there. And so leading up to that, in college, in grad school, everything, my family was always so proud. They wanted to tell people I was going to be a doctor, which, first of all, not that kind of doctor. Second of all, I didn't become a doctor. And that's a story for a different time. But everybody was so proud. They always, you're so smart. How do you remember all these things? Whatever. They said they were so proud to tell people what I was doing and what I was researching and all this stuff. And then COVID happened. It's hard to talk about without details, but it's also hard to talk about because it makes me very sad. I had family members calling me to ask me about what I thought about the situation, just to find out that they actually had called to tell me that I was wrong and was falling for some ploy of the government or the news or whatever. This was frustrating, not only because they called me, but also because I do have years and years of research behind me. I was surrounded by not only leading experts in biomedical research, but the ones who have been studying everything that incrementally led to the vaccine. And it was heartbreaking and sad to watch not only so many people die unnecessarily, but also just to watch the faith in science crumble. Anything that involves a lot of money is going to have corruption in some places, but I can tell you nobody gets to that stage in their career without, at least at the beginning, wanting to do what's right and wanting to help people. It's just not fun. It doesn't pay well. Like, it's just, point being, the same people that were so proud that I worked there and so proud that I was doing all of these things were telling me that I was wrong and completely disregarding not just what I said, but what experts said. They didn't think that I was smart enough to understand or distill the information, like, which was also just baffling to me because you think that, like, Tucker Carlson is? I don't know. Anyway, it's upsetting. And I watched scientific communicators behind the scenes on TV in the public trying to really meet people where they were, trying to not oversimplify things, but also not make it like inaccessible to people, which is, by the way, the crux of all scientific communication, because to be a scientist, you have to be an expert. To communicate it to someone who is not an expert, you have to find a way to distill is the right word, really complex things that it took you years and years and years and years to learn in a short amount of time, without making them feel like you think they're stupid, without, you know, lying, without being misleading. It's always been a hard kind of point. And there's a lot of reason to not trust science. We've had horrible examples in the not too far the past of experimentation on people of color. There's been, not to mention the terrible things that people like Mendele did in Nazi Germany and all of that. But it was actually the, like, crumbling of science, like the perception and trust in science and the trust in, like, the actual people doing it. The regulations and things that have been put in place to protect against terrible situations like that being undermined, muddled, and just flat out lied about. And it had real costs. Millions of people died who didn't need to. And now, even more so, millions and millions of people are dying because they don't have access to resources, they don't have access to medication to treat things that are entirely treatable, like tuberculosis, because we're funding destructive things like war. I don't know. It was just weird. It was a weird place to be in, to have my expertise touted and disregarded at the same time. And then an even more personal anecdote is when my mom was dying. One, I didn't get to see her during COVID because I was so afraid that either she would die because we went there or Alice would die because we went there. I couldn't go there. Like, in good conscience, I couldn't go there. So she was dying, and this was after COVID-ish, after the everything being shut down, COVID anyway, quarantine aspects. We made it to the place she was, where she died, and we got there while she was still awake and conscious and everything, and so that was great. But my uncle, her mother, love him to death. We have very different views. And in, like, out of good intent, like, he didn't do this to be mean. He was like, you really should go back and finish your PhD. And I wanted to scream at him and be like, 10 minutes ago, you didn't want to take a COVID test before you entered an old person assisted living home where you would put every single other person here at risk of dying because you're afraid they're going to do something with your DNA. And then tell me that I should finish my PhD. Why? If even my own family don't trust my thoughts or views on it, it's one thing that you can do what you want. If you don't want to take the vaccine, that's fine. But to not trust trust in me during this time. Anyway, it was very frustrating. Obviously, didn't say that because I had bigger things to worry about, like my mom dying next to me. But we devalue expertise in a capitalistic society that relies on them. It doesn't make any sense. Capitalism assumes that everybody has their skill and you pay them for their skill based on what you perceive its value to be. If you don't value experts, capitalism immediately crumbles. Your mechanic you trust to fix your car. Some of them are a little sketchy, but in general, you'd probably trust it more than your, I don't know, child who's been studying literature. Like, it's just, it doesn't make sense. Okay, now that I've rambled on for way too long about that, the next part. The devaluing of learning. I originally was thinking of saying the devaluing of education, but I think that that's also misleading. The example being the lie slash naive belief millennials were fed that higher education is necessary for everything and that you're never going to get a job without it and that it will totally pay back the cost it is. One, schools leading up to higher education are so focused on arbitrary test scores that they forgot to teach people how to learn. That was very true in COVID. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. I think learning is fun. I think it makes life doable, and it's not surprising to me that people who weren't taught to learn and were only taught to achieve a performance-based thing are not equipped to do things like go to a college. And even if they are, there's no point in it because our values, expertise isn't valued. It costs so much, you're going to be in debt the rest of your life. And most of the people, like the millennials who did that, still don't have jobs and are in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and blamed for it. So it's just in a society that doesn't value learning and one that doesn't value expertise. My third point, it brings you to a space for manipulation on either side of the freaking line. During COVID, it might have been tempting to simplify and say, well, we're all dying and this is not okay and you need to do this without acknowledging the other side of it. Or you can say it's all going to be gone by Easter because you're the fucking Messiah or something. Like, it's not good either way. Money has always been the driver of, the world, or at least the one we live in right now. It has never been in good faith that the people, the public, are not educated and the wealthy are. Every dystopian novel ever will tell you that. Not US example, in South Korea, when everybody, like the wealthiest class, was speaking and reading and writing in Chinese, and the public, the people, could not. Oh my God, what's his name? Oh my God, I'm so terrible. I don't remember. Anyway, there was a king who essentially was like, this is not okay. I want my people to be able to read and write as well. If you've devalued all the experts and you've not allowed people to learn or to learn, you create an inescapable reliance on the wealthy. This whole video was about how, like, why are people wrong about AI water usage? It's complex. You can frame it a lot of different ways if people are only relying on the information that you give them, which is pretty much the case. And it is bad, and it's easy to exaggerate and say, well, every query, you might as well just burn down a forest, which I've heard people say that. And I have personally been frustrated with this phrasing because it's not accurate. It also implies that AI has to be the way that it is, which is not. And then it's only 0.000 whatever, 1/15th of a teaspoon of water for every query that a user puts in. There's a lot of things to unpack there, and I think Hank did a much better job than I will. I just wanted to add two tiny things. One of the most common hidden costs, and I think that every one of us is responsible for contributing to, is the human capital behind it. The loss of either human life, human quality of life, exploitation, all of those things that we have shown time and time again are not necessary. That's always a thing. The other one, he talked about the cost of water usage in agriculture. And this is an interesting one for me because I read a book in my freshman year of college, which I do not remember the name of, and I cannot find it. Anyway, I became a vegetarian because I read this book, and it wasn't because of a moral reason, although I do think animals should be treated better. It was because of the environmental cost of agriculture. The water it takes to keep livestock, the way that we keep livestock, the way that it's inefficient and wasteful, and how a lot of the water goes to corn, which is what Hank talks about, and it goes to like ethanol production. But one of the things I remember from this book also was like if we took all of the land that we raise livestock, like cattle, on, and planted edible food, not all food is edible, as we see in the case of this corn. As my friends, my freshman year, who tried to steal corn from one of the local farms, found out it's not all edible for us. So it's either used to make ethanol, it's used to feed livestock. If we took that land and grew editable vegetation on it, it wouldn't destroy the land the way that raising cattle does. I'm not a vegetarian anymore for a lot of reasons, but when I'm able, I will probably go back to that. Then there's like the water runoff from farms, the water usage. There's just so many things that we don't think about because it's for food, because farms grow food, which no, we have this like dissonance from stuff like that because we argue over things like morality and concepts when really the issue is the details. Thinking that AI as a concept is evil, it's going to take our jobs, is both extremely short-sighted and, in my opinion, nihilistic. You can see that it doesn't have to take that amount of water. And if it does take that amount of water, we need to at least believe that it doesn't have to, and then actually put in infrastructure and funding and things to figure out how to do that. The jobs are short-sighted because, one, we could adjust our system of work, which is already fucked, instead of just saying that they're going to take our jobs. So all in all, it's very complicated and it's very messy, but there are so many aspects in this that don't need to be that way, period. Like we have shown, I think Good Dot Store is an example of this, all of Vlogbrothers and Nerd Criteria, and so many people are trying to figure out how to do these different things in a way that is okay. But if we're letting billionaires and letting the people who control the wealth control the morality, it's not going to look good for us. So I want to make the case both for us but for nuance. Because if you don't accept nuance and you don't include it in the conversation, you create walls between whatever two parties are supposed to be communicating. Quote, Mega voiced early on that they felt like they were being treated as stupid, which it feels like some of the things they do feel very stupid, but some of the things that, quote, liberals do also is stupid. And by making everything seem like it's cut and dry when it clearly is not, just leads to people shouting at each other from either side of the conversation. And take from some of my favorite creators, it pays to have hope. Having hope is necessary for hope. It's complicated, and that's okay. We don't have to not talk about it if we don't know. That is different from making claims when we don't know. But being able to have a conversation and trust/rely on the expertise of multiple parties is necessary for growth communication. And then, lastly, you can always change your mind. Can't always change the consequences of what you have done, but you can change your mind.